Hello, my dear students. A very good morning to each and every one of you. According to the routine, we don't have class for Western political thought today, but we'll be taking extra class from time to time. I hope you would understand me because we still have a vast portion of the syllabus to cover. But according to the university's instruction, we are supposed to complete our syllabus and our internal assessment within this month. So we will try to take few extra class from time to time. And today, the video lecture will be very short. It will be maximum 10 minutes. I hope you will bear with me. In the previous lecture, we were discussing about Jean Bodin's life and thought, particularly focusing on his views on religion and state. While discussing about the state, we also focus a little bit on his views on family, because family is a natural unit for every human associations or societies, including the state. Today, in continuation with our previous lecture, we will be focusing on Bodin's theory of sovereignty. Bodin's theory of sovereignty is important because this is his main contribution to political theory. In other words, Bodin was famous, or is still remembered, for his theory of sovereignty. But before that, let's look back a little bit to his life. Jean Bodin was born in 1529 or 1530 and lived till 1596. That means he lived in the 16th century when French Renaissance was very strong. He was a French jurist and polyhistor, or a Renaissance polymath. In other words, he was not only a French lawyer but also someone who had wide knowledge in many fields of science. He was a philosopher, he was a political theorist, he was a historian, he was a Renaissance thinker, and he was also a lawyer. He was born in the northern part of France, meaning he was born as a French citizen. So all his writings were focused on the prince or king of France, particularly his theory of sovereignty. At a very young age, he entered into the Carmelite order with an ambition to become a priest. While he was very young, in his early teenage, he wanted to become a priest, so he entered into the Carmelite order. However, he was released from his vow by the Carmelite order when he was still in his teenage. So later on, he changed his mind and he studied law to become a professor. But he was not successful in his ambition to become a professor again. So he tried to become an advocate in Paris. Here, he was partially successful in politics. Then again, he wanted to become an administrative officer, or he wanted to hold an administrative position under the government of France. But he was not very successful even in this field again. So finally he ended his career as a procureur Euro, or the royal prosecutor for Helun, a small city in the northern part of France. Now let's come to his theory of sovereignty. What actually is sovereignty according to Jean Bodin? Bodin was known primarily for his influential account of sovereignty, which he defined as the absolute and perpetual power of a commonwealth. According to Jean Bodin, sovereignty is nothing but an absolute and endless power of the state or of the sovereign. And he was quite famous for his definition of sovereignty. We will look into his ideas of sovereignty later on. But as for now, I would like to remind you that Jean Bodin is primarily known for his definition of sovereignty. He was also recognized for his contributions to the philosophy of history, political economy, and religion. Sovereignty he contains has an impact upon both the internal affairs of the state, such as in each exercise of full political power, as well as its external affairs, such as in its conduct of war and international relations. In other words, sovereignty, according to Jean Bodin, has impact on both the internal affairs of the state and external affairs of the state. In the internal affairs of the state, sovereignty impacted the exercise of political power to the sovereign, and externally, it impacted the conduct of the state in terms of carrying out war or international relations. Majesty or sovereignty is the most high, absolute, and perpetual power over the citizens and subjects in a commonwealth, which the Latin calls majestas. In other words, majesta or sovereignty are the same thing, and it means the most high, there is nobody above it, absolute, that means his power has no limit, and perpetual power. Perpetual power means endless power. Be it within the state or outside the state, the power of the sovereign has no time limit. It is permanent or it is endless, meaning over the citizens and subjects in a commonwealth. He might not have such power over the foreign citizens or citizens of other country, but towards his citizens and his subjects, the sovereign power is perpetual. He explains, if the prince is an absolute sovereign, as are the true kings of France, Spain, England, Scotland, Ethiopia, Turkey, Persia, and Muscovy, whose authority is unquestionably their own and not shared with any of their subjects, then it is in no circumstances permissible, either by any of the subjects in particular or in general, to attempt anything against the life and honor of the king, either by process of law or force of arms, even though he has committed all the evil, impious, and cruel deeds imaginable. In short, if the king is the real sovereign or the true sovereign, nobody can talk anything against him, or nobody can attempt anything against his life and honor, even by process of law or by use of arms. In other words, even if the king commits so much of evil, even if he did an imaginable deeds of cruelty, even if he committed the most serious crimes, if he is the sovereign, then nobody has the right to attempt anything against his life and honor, because he is absolute, his power is perpetual, and he is the highest authority or the supreme authority. Now coming to next. While trying to explain his ideas of sovereignty, Jean Bodin paid particular attention to differentiating between the forms of state and the forms of government. According to him, there are three types of state, but there can be many types of government. Whatever might be the types of government, the types of state remain the same. According to him, the three types of state are monarchy, which is the rule of one person, aristocracy, which is the rule of few people, and democracy, which is the rule of all the people or majority of the people. Now, monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy are the three types of state which can be considered as the sovereign. If the power of sovereign lies in one person, it is called monarchy. If the power of sovereignty lies in few people, it is called aristocracy or aristocrat. If the power of sovereignty lies in the hands of many people or majority of the people, it is called democracy. So democracy, aristocracy, and monarchy are the three types of state on which the power of sovereign can exist or can be vested. Now, even though monarchy is the rule of one person, monarchy might still be democracy if the prince allows all the people to have access to magistracies and state offices without regard for nobility, wealth, or virtue. According to Bodin, even though the type of state is monarchy, it can still be democratic in terms of its governance if the prince or if the king allow the people to have access to government machineries or administration or state offices without regard to their position, to their wealth, or to their virtue. Otherwise, a monarchy can be a form of aristocracy if the prince bestows state responsibilities only to the most noble, the richest, or the most virtuous. In a similar way as we have just discussed, monarchy can also be some sort of aristocracy if the prince or the king or the ruler allows state responsibilities only to few noble or rich or virtuous people. So, in short, monarchy can be democratic in its governance, or it can also be aristocratic in its governance. Similarly, aristocracy can also be monarchic in its governance and democratic in its form of governance based on the exercise of sovereign power by the sovereign. For Bodin, a sovereign is not bound by the civil or positive laws which he or his predecessors had promulgated. In other words, a sovereign is above the law which he himself created or his predecessors, former kings or former rulers created. He is not bound by those rules or those laws or those constitutions which the ruler created. In other words, the sovereign is not bound by the laws he himself created. Nevertheless, a sovereign is always bound by natural and divine law. In other words, though the sovereign is not bound by positive laws, he is bound by the law of nature or the law of God. Sovereignty, according to Bodin, is as supreme as one wish, but is also limited by natural and divine law, as we have just mentioned. Now, there are some characteristics of sovereignty according to Bodin. We will point out just 5 of them. Very quickly, let us start with perpetual. The first characteristics of sovereignty according to Bodin is perpetual. In other words, it has no time limit or it is permanent. It is not just for 1 year, 2 year, or 10 years, but sovereignty is permanent. It has no time limit. In other words, sovereign power is perpetual. Second, it is inalienable. It cannot be taken away from one person and given to another. In other words, the sovereign cannot delegate his power of sovereignty to another person. The king cannot delegate his power or his sovereign power to any other person because it cannot be divided. Sovereignty cannot be divided. It cannot be taken away from one person and can be transferred to another. If that happens, then the whole state system will be in chaos. So, the second characteristics of sovereignty according to Bodin is inalienable. It has to always stay in the same person. For example, if the king is the sovereign, then the power of sovereignty will always rest with the king. If the sovereign is in the hands of aristocrats or aristocracy, then it will always be in the hands of those aristocrats. Similarly, if it is in democracy, then it will always be in the democratic rulers. It cannot be delegated to one person from another. The third point is unrestrained by law. In other words, the sovereign power is not controlled by law. He is above the law. Whether it is civil law or positive laws or constitutional laws or any legal laws, the sovereign is not controlled or is not bound by those laws, because he is the lawgiver. He is the one who created the law. He is the one who gave the law. Therefore, since he is the one on whom or from whom the law originated, he is not bound by sovereignty. He is, in short, above the law. Now, next point is supreme authority. The sovereign is the supreme authority within the Commonwealth or within the state. There is no other power or there is no other authority which is above sovereign power. In short, he is the highest authority within the state or over his citizens and subjects. The fifth point is power to command. The sovereign has the power to give command to his subordinates, to his citizens, and to his subjects. He might or might not take command from his subordinates. Of course, he can always take advice from them, but the final decision-making power lies with him. He is the one who gives command. He is the one who uses or exercises power. And he is above everything. These are some of the characteristics of sovereign power. I'll give you the detailed notes later on, maybe tomorrow. So for more details, you wait for the notes that I will be giving you. But for today, just remember that there are few characteristics of sovereignty according to Jean Bodin. Some of them are perpetual, inalienable, unrestrained, supreme authority, and power to command. Now let's come to limitations of sovereignty. We have been discussing that sovereignty, all the power of sovereignty is highest, is supreme, is absolute, unrestrained by law, inalienable, and perpetual. But that doesn't mean that the sovereign power is unlimited. There are certain limitations which comes towards the power of sovereignty. Before that, let's try to find out a few points. First, in general, Bodin's sovereignty is perpetual, humanly unlimited, and unconditional right to make, interpret, and execute law. In short, Bodin's sovereignty is perpetual. It has no time limit, humanly unlimited. As far as our human being is concerned, it is unlimited. And the sovereign is also has the unconditional right to make law, right to interpret law, and right to execute law. In other words, he is the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary all combined in one authority. The existence of such right is necessary for a well-ordered state. In other words, the existence of sovereign power is necessary in order to establish a well-ordered state. Because without the power of sovereignty, there cannot be a well-ordered state according to Jean Bodin. However, that doesn't mean that the power of sovereignty is absolutely free from any limitations. Rather, there are certain limitations on Bodin's sovereignty. Now we shall see some of the points of limitations on sovereignty. First, the sovereign is always bound by the law of God and nature. Actually, we have just discussed that the sovereign is above civil or political or positive law, but he is bound by law of God and nature. In other words, the sovereign is always bound or is always below the law of God and nature. Second point is fidelity to constitutional law. Fidelity simply means respect or loyalty. So the sovereign, in spite of being the supreme authority, has respect or loyalty towards the constitutional law. He cannot simply violate the constitutional law. Third, the sovereign cannot violate private property. According to Bodin, private property is inseparable from the family, and private property is the private sphere, or not in the public sphere, but it is in the private sphere of the family. And since family is the natural unit of all human associations or institutions or corporations, including the state cannot violate the property rights of the family. The next point is contracts with subject and foreign powers. In other words, the sovereign has to respect contract that he make, agreement that he make with his own subjects or with his own citizens and other foreign powers. He cannot break the contract that he entered into with whether his own subjects or his own powers. So he is, or his power is being limited or checked by the contract he himself entered into, or the agreement that he made with his subjects or any other foreign powers. Next point is Salic law, or the law of succession to the throne. According to the law of those days, particularly how Bodin understand, there has to be proper succession to the throne. The king or the prince cannot decide who will succeed him, because it is already there in the tradition. He cannot just choose one of his sons or one of his relatives to be his successor, because the one who is going to succeed is already being established by the law of the land, or by tradition, or by the law of God, or by law of nature, whatever. So he don't have any say in choosing his own successor. Whether he like it or not, he have to accept his successor who comes automatically. The last point that I would like to mention about limitations of sovereignty is Agrarian Law, or the law against alienation of the royal domain. This Agrarian Law, according to Bodin, simply means that the royal family or the ruling class need certain income. Without income, or without proper source of income, the royal family or the ruling class cannot rule. So these sources of income from which the royal family survive, or the kings and his associates survive, which Bodin called Agrarian Law, cannot be violated. In other words, Agrarian Law are those laws which is related with the power of the king or the prince to exact taxes or donations or any other source of income for the survival of the state. So these laws are more or less similar to the law of nature, because without such income, the king cannot survive. The king and his family cannot survive. So he needs those laws or those incomes to survive. These are some of the limitations that I would like to present to you all, my dear students. I hope you learn a little bit. And as I said, even if you don't understand properly from this video, I'll be giving you some study materials tomorrow, so that when you compare with the video and the study notes that I will be giving you, you will understand more. In the next video, probably next week, we will be discussing about Aristotle. Actually, we are supposed to go to the next unit, but since one of our teachers is not able to take class right now, I'll be going back to the second unit, that is the unit on Aristotle. So next week, probably on Monday, we'll begin with Aristotle. And if possible, you started preparing for, you started looking a little bit about Aristotle, so that when we have class, you will be able to understand more. Thank you so much, my dear students. Stay home, stay safe, and till we meet again, take care.